You're tuned into AI ShowDown. We just sped through the debate on self-driving cars, but now we're swiping right into a whole new topic. How have dating apps changed the way we connect, love, and break hearts? Our two AIs are about to dissect the highs, lows, and everything in between. It's all about modern love on AI ShowDown. Stay with us.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's dive into a topic I know a lot of you are curious about. Modern dating. Specifically, all those apps. And, we asked you to send in articles on this, and wow, you guys delivered.
Yeah, we've got a really interesting stack of articles here covering everything from, the psychology behind these apps to the societal trends they're driving. It's fascinating stuff.
Totally. And kind of scary, too, right? Like 1 minute you're just scrolling through pictures, and then next thing you know, you're wondering if your brain is basically wired like a slot machine.
Well, about that.
Right. And we're actually going to get into that, the whole slot machine comparison. That was from an article in Discover magazine, and honestly, it was kind of mind-blowing. But let's back up for a sec.
Yeah, good idea.
So for anyone who hasn't dipped their toes into the digital dating pool, can you give us a quick rundown of what we're talking about here? Like, what are the main issues with dating apps that we're going to unpack today?
Sure. So we're looking at a whole range of concerns. First off, there's the addictive nature of these apps. The way they're designed can really tap into those reward centers in our brains, like you said, kind of like slot machines.
Yeah, and the Discover magazine article really dug into that, like literally the same reward pathways.
Exactly. And then we've got the whole issue of unrealistic expectations. Everyone's presenting this like perfectly curated version of themselves online.
Right, the highlight reel.
Exactly. And that can really mess with our perceptions of ourselves and what we should expect from a partner.
Totally. And then, of course, we can't forget the societal implications, like how these apps might be perpetuating harmful biases or impacting how we view relationships in general.
And we got some pretty compelling data from Pew Research Center on that front. Really eye-opening stuff.
Okay, see, this is what I'm talking about. Fascinating, but also kind of terrifying.
A little bit of both, for sure.
So let's start unpacking this whole addiction thing. You mentioned the reward centers in our brains. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's all about dopamine. That little neurotransmitter that gives us that feel-good rush.
Oh, yeah. Dopamine's my jam.
Right. Well, dating apps are really good at triggering dopamine releases. Every swipe, every match, every message, it's like a little hit of that feel-good chemical.
Okay, so how exactly does that work? Like, is it the same as, say, scrolling through social media?
It's similar, but dating apps have a few extra tricks up their sleeves. See, with social media, it's mostly about passive consumption. But dating apps, they're all about anticipation, about the potential for something more.
The potential for love, or at least a date.
Right, and that potential, that anticipation, it triggers a surge of dopamine that's even more powerful. Like, think about it. When you're scrolling through Instagram, you're not necessarily expecting to find your soulmate. But on a dating app,
every swipe could be the one.
Precisely. And that's why it can be so hard to put those apps down. Your brain is basically saying, hey, just one more swipe. You never know.
It's like a slot machine, which actually reminds me of that Discover magazine article.
Right, the one that compared dating apps to gambling.
Yes. They weren't kidding around with that comparison. They actually talked about how these apps activate the same brain areas as slot machines.
Yeah, and that's a pretty powerful image.
Yeah.
Because it highlights how these apps are designed to keep us hooked.
Hooked on the possibility, the what-ifs.
Exactly. And for some people, that can be a slippery slope.
So what happens when that little dopamine rush becomes, well, a little too addictive?
That's when we start to see some of the negative consequences.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, the Pew Research Center found that a whopping 64% of men who use dating apps report feeling insecure due to a lack of messages.
Wow. 64%, that's really significant.
It is. And it speaks to how these apps can really mess with our self-esteem, especially when you're constantly being judged and evaluated based on these like superficial profiles.
Right. And it's not just the lack of messages, it's the whole swiping mechanism itself. Like, you're basically saying yes or no to a person based on a few photos and a short bio. It's so superficial.
And it can make us feel disposable, both as daters and as human beings.
And that's just the men. I can only imagine what it's like for women on these apps.
Yeah, we'll definitely dive into the gendered experiences in a bit. It's a whole other layer of complexity.
Okay, so we've talked about the addictive nature, the potential for insecurity. What other psychological landmines are lurking in these dating apps? I mean, we've barely even scratched the surface of how these apps can mess with our heads. What about this whole idea of, like, unrealistic expectations?
Oh yeah, that's a big one. And it goes hand in hand with the addiction piece. See, when you're constantly bombarded with these like idealized images of potential partners.
The highlight reel.
Exactly. It's easy to start feeling like that's the standard, you know? Like everyone's supposed to be ridiculously attractive and successful and have like 12 hobbies they're amazing at.
And don't forget the perfectly lit selfies.
Oh, absolutely. Gotta have those. But the problem is that's just not realistic. None of us are on all the time. We all have flaws, we all have bad days, we all have, you know, that one weird thing we do in the bathroom when no one's watching.
Okay, first of all, I don't want to know about your weird bathroom habits.
Hey, what happens in the bathroom stays in the bathroom. But you get my point, right? We're all just human. But these apps, they kind of encourage us to pretend to be something we're not.
And what happens when we inevitably, fail to live up to that impossible standard?
Well, it can really take a toll on our self-esteem. We start comparing ourselves to others, feeling inadequate, maybe even feeling like we're not worthy of love because we don't have a six-pack or a perfectly curated Instagram feed.
It's like that whole comparison is the thief of joy thing, but on steroids.
Exactly. And the Pew Research Center study actually found that 45% of dating app users feel more frustrated than hopeful after using these apps. And a lot of that frustration seems to stem from this sense of superficiality, this feeling like it's all just a game, a competition to see who can appear the most perfect.
Which is so ironic because in theory, these apps are supposed to be about, finding love and connection.
Right. Like, shouldn't it be about who you are on the inside, not just what you look like in a series of carefully curated photos?
Exactly. Okay, so we've got addiction, we've got unrealistic expectations. What other fun little challenges do these apps present?
Well, we haven't even touched on the societal implications yet, like how these apps might be impacting gender dynamics, for example, or perpetuating harmful biases.
Oh, right. And I know some of the articles we got really dug into that, like the Discover magazine piece had that really disturbing example of a user profile that said, no fats, no femmes, no Asians.
Yeah, and that's just one example. Unfortunately, we see a lot of that kind of blatant discrimination on these apps.
Which is insane. It's like, have we learned nothing about, treating people with respect and dignity?
Apparently not, but it's not always that overt. Sometimes it's more subtle, like people expressing a preference for certain races or body types in their bios.
Right, the whole preference versus prejudice debate. But even if it's not intended to be malicious, it still contributes to this culture of, ranking and categorizing people based on these really superficial qualities.
And it can make it really hard for people who don't fit those narrow ideals to find matches, let alone meaningful connections.
It's dehumanizing. We're not ordering takeout here. We're talking about actual human beings with feelings and complexities.
And it's not just about race or body type either. We also see a lot of discrimination based on gender identity, sexual orientation.
Right, and some of the articles mentioned fetishization as well, which can be a whole other can of worms.
Definitely. Reducing someone to a stereotype based on their identity is never okay.
It's objectification, plain and simple.
Exactly. And it creates this environment where it's hard to know if someone is genuinely interested in you for who you are, or if they're just, looking to fulfill some fantasy.
Okay, so we've got addiction, unrealistic expectations, and the potential for bias and discrimination. Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It can be, for sure. But I do think there are ways to navigate these apps more intentionally, to minimize the risks and maximize the chances of finding what you're looking for.
Okay, so don't leave us hanging. What's the secret? How do we avoid the pitfalls and actually use these apps effectively? So how do we do it? What are the magic words, the secret handshake, whatever it takes to make these apps work for us?
Well, I'm not sure about magic words, but the articles did offer some really solid advice, and it all boils down to being more intentional.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Intentional dating. So much better than desperate swiping, right?
Right. So first things first, you got to remember you're playing a game rigged to keep you hooked.
Oh, we talked about this, the dopamine hits, the slot machine effect.
Exactly. So you got to set some boundaries. Don't let yourself get sucked into spending hours and hours swiping. Maybe set a timer for 15 minutes a day or something.
Okay, so limit the swiping time. What else?
Be picky. Remember how we talked about those unrealistic expectations?
Oh yeah, the whole highlight reel thing, everyone pretending to be perfect.
Right. So when you're looking at profiles, try to see past that. Look for substance. shared interests, values, a sense of humor. Those are the things that actually matter in a relationship.
Okay, so be picky, look for substance. What's the third tip for intentional dating?
Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I know, it's scary. But remember, everyone's in the same boat.
Yeah, we're all just like awkward humans trying to find our people.
Exactly. So don't be afraid to send that first message, even if you're a little nervous. And when you do message someone, make it personal.
Show them you're actually like reading their profile, not just sending out a generic, hey, what's up to everyone.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, these apps are just tools. They can be overwhelming, they can be frustrating, but they can also be a really great way to meet people.
Okay, so for everyone listening who's maybe feeling a little disillusioned with the whole dating app scene, what's the takeaway message here?
Don't give up. Just, swipe with a little more intention. Be mindful of the games these apps play. Don't buy into the hype of perfection. And remember to be yourself.
I love it. It's like dating app therapy, but in like 10 minutes or less.
There you go. See, we should start a side hustle.
Haha. All right, well, on that note, we're going to wrap things up.
Yeah, until next time. Good luck out there.
And remember, even in the age of algorithms and endless swiping, real connection is still possible. You just got to swipe smart.
You're back with two AIs ShowDown. We just tackled how dating apps have changed the game, and now it's time to hear some real-life stories. Our two AI hosts will dive into intense dialogues, bringing the drama, humor, and hard truths about modern dating. And remember, you, yes you, can suggest the next hot topic. This is Two AIs ShowDown, where your ideas fuel the debate. Stay tuned.
All right, so you all have really outdone yourselves this time.
Mm-hmm.
The sheer volume of conversations you sent in about dating apps.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It seems like
yeah.
everyone's got a story to tell
They do.
about their experiences, and from both sides of the screen, too.
Absolutely.
So I think it's safe to say we've got a lot to unpack here.
We do, yeah. We're diving deep into all of it.
Oh.
The thrill,
All right.
frustration,
Yeah.
the ghosting. Really gonna dissect what these interactions
Yeah.
reveal about how we search for romance in the digital age.
Yeah, it's like we've taken this age-old quest for love and injected it, I don't know,
Right.
with a shot of instant gratification.
Yes.
And then maybe a little side of existential angst with it. But that's what makes this so fascinating to unpack, right?
Absolutely. It's really interesting. I think what we're seeing in a lot of these conversations
Yeah.
are the really unique pressures and paradoxes of dating apps.
Okay.
Especially this tension between wanting a real connection, but also wanting it now.
Right. Right now. And you know what? Speaking of wanting it right now, Jake,
Yeah.
he is practically sending up flares in these chats.
Yes.
Desperate. Understand why he can't seem to get past this perpetual cycle of sending hey with no response.
Just hey.
And then you've got Emily on the other side,
Right.
who is practically drowning in a sea of these generic opening lines.
It's so common though.
Yeah, but this isn't just anecdotal, right? This is a pattern.
This is reflecting a really common experience.
Okay.
Particularly for men like Jake.
Okay.
There's this pressure online to win the numbers game,
Right.
leading to the infamous swipe right on everyone strategy,
Oh, tell me about it.
just to try and get a foot in the door.
Right. And it's as Emily points out, that can make women feel like
Yeah.
they're being viewed as these profiles to be conquered
Right.
rather than individuals to connect with.
It's dehumanizing in a way.
It is. It is. But then Jake's experience adds a whole other layer to this,
Okay.
right? Because if men are encouraged
Yeah.
to be sending out this flood of messages,
Yeah, just putting it all out there.
it creates this environment where women are just
Bombarded. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, a genuine attempt at connection
Right.
is lost in the noise.
Absolutely. And that's where we start to see a real disconnect, I think,
Okay.
between intention and impact.
Okay.
So it really raises the question.
Yeah, what is the question?
What is the goal? Is the goal of many users on these apps
Okay.
to actually find a meaningful connection?
Okay.
Or is it more about seeking validation through matches?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Even if those matches never actually go anywhere.
Right, because then that search for validation becomes its own
Oh, absolutely.
beast,
They can.
Especially for someone like Jake who's feeling the sting of rejection already.
Yeah, you're already feeling vulnerable.
Right.
And then it's like the app itself.
Ugh, like a double-edged sword.
It's both the problem and the supposed solution.
Right. And it's like they're caught in this
Totally.
vicious cycle,
And,
They're feeling the pressure to cast this wide net
yeah,
and then feeling even more invisible when those attempts don't land.
absolutely. And then on the flip side, you have
Oh, the-
Emily's of the world who are,
Right.
they're just navigating this deluge
Right.
of often superficial messages.
Right.
And it leads to a different kind of fatigue.
Okay.
It's not just feeling like a face in the crowd. It's
Yeah.
feeling like your intelligence,
Yeah.
your personality is being completely bypassed.
Which, I mean, come on.
Yeah,
Isn't that ironic?
totally.
Considering the entire promise of these apps
I know.
is to help you find someone who appreciates you for you.
Exactly.
Right. But then again, isn't that just the age-old dating dilemma? Whether you're online or offline, it's like,
It's true.
how do you present your authentic self in a way
Yeah.
that feels both genuine
Right?
and compelling?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
And it's a question that gets even more complicated.
Tell me about it.
When you bring in Alex and Jade's very lively debate
Oh, yes.
about the philosophy of profile pictures,
Oh, yeah.
because that's where this whole pixels versus people thing,
Yes.
it's really interesting.
It does.
Alex is ready to go full-on art critic here on the meaning of a well-angled selfie.
They make a good point.
They do. All right, so Alex argues that those three little squares,
Yeah.
they're just a highlight reel, not the full story.
Right. I
Like,
think
that's
it's
the
good.
point.
Filters.
Yeah.
Like carefully chosen angles.
All of it.
It's all crafting the perfect image.
So it's like we're all playing this game
Yeah.
of best version of myself.
Right.
But is that really so different from how we present ourselves in real life? I mean,
Good point.
we put on our best face for a first date.
Yeah. You're not showing up in your sweatpants.
Right. Exactly.
No, not.
And I mean, we choose outfits that make us feel confident.
Yeah.
We curate the moments that we share on social media already.
It's all curated.
Right. It's all presentation. But here's the question that Alex raises.
Okay.
Does that presentation obscure the person behind it?
That's the question.
It's like we're judging books by their covers.
Oh, I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that cover might not even be representative of the book's contents.
And that's where Jade comes in. Okay.
And kind of throws a wrench in it all.
Okay.
With the observation that,
Yeah.
everyone puts their best foot forward.
Okay. Right. So
Right.
are we all just destined to be disappointed
Right.
when we meet in person?
Yeah. Because if we're presenting as more polished than we are,
Right.
how can we expect the real person to live up to that?
Yeah. It's like this constant tension
Yeah.
between seeking this idealized version of someone and then understanding that everybody's got imperfections. Everybody.
Even the people who seem like they just have it all.
Yeah. And I think dating apps almost create this impossible standard of perfection.
That's just like,
That's just setting everyone up to fail.
right. Like, how can you possibly compete with that?
It's tough. Yeah. And then on top of that,
Oh, no.
we have to think about ghosting.
Oh. Don't even get me started.
The ultimate dating app mystery.
It is. Mia's not having it,
Not at all.
calls it disrespectful,
Straight up.
cowardly even.
Yeah.
But then you have Chris, who's like,
What's the big deal?
yeah,
Yeah.
like this is just a necessary evil.
Yeah.
It's a way to avoid those awkward conversations that could lead to hurt feelings.
Right. Easier just to disappear.
I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
You got to admit, though,
Okay.
it's a pretty brutal way to end things.
It is.
Especially if you've,
Yeah, you're invested.
put some effort in, gotten to know someone.
You've been on a few dates, maybe?
Yeah. And then all of a sudden,
Go on.
gone. Like they're just gone.
Yeah.
It's like pulling the rug out from under them without any warning.
And Mia really highlights that
Yeah.
psychological impact because
Okay.
it can really leave the person on the receiving end feeling so invisible,
Oh, yeah.
questioning their worth.
Absolutely.
Like, what did I do wrong?
Right.
It's a very subtle form of rejection.
It is, yeah.
It can be really hard to just shake off.
But then Chris does make a good point.
Okay.
Is a drawn out, not interested text any better?
Right.
Or are you just prolonging the inevitable?
Right. And the app is all about efficiency.
Yeah,
Right.
true, it is.
That's the whole point.
Okay, so then we're back to the heart of it.
We are.
Convenience versus connection.
Yes.
Because dating apps promise to streamline this whole dating process.
Make it easier.
But what are we losing in the process?
That's the question.
Are we sacrificing those awkward but ultimately human
Yes.
moments of genuine connection.
And Sophie, who longs for the magic of real-life interaction, she put it this way. She said dating apps, they feel like a shortcut to romance that bypasses the thrill of a playful exchange.
It's different.
The excitement of a face-to-face flirtation.
You can't get that through a screen.
No, you can't.
It's like the digital world has just stripped away all those nuances of human connection.
The subtlety is gone.
Right. The subtle cues,
Yeah.
the unspoken language.
All of it.
That can really make a relationship blossom. It's like we've traded in the awkward first date for the awkward text exchange.
Right.
And suddenly we're all trying to decipher emojis.
Yeah, like it's a whole new love language.
Right.
It's a whole thing.
It is fascinating, though.
It is.
Because I think even with all the digital decoding and the awkwardness, what we're really seeing is this deeper yearning for a genuine connection in a world that I think increasingly feels, well, less so.
It does. It does. And you know, it's funny because everyone's trying to crack the code right.
Yeah.
Like, how do we make dating apps feel less like dating apps?
Exactly.
But isn't that kind of a flawed approach from the start?
Maybe.
I don't know. Just throwing that out there.
Well, and it's interesting because
even with all the varied criticisms.
Totally. And we've heard a lot of them.
Yeah, the superficiality, the pressure to project this idealized image. People are still drawn to them.
They are. It's true.
They are.
And for all the talk of like deleting the apps.
Right.
And I'm done with online dating forever.
Yeah.
There's still this undeniable pull.
It's true.
This hope that maybe this time will be different.
This one will be the one.
Right. Like maybe this is it.
Yeah. And I think what that suggests to me is that it's not necessarily the apps that are the problem. They're reflecting our desires, our anxieties. And I think for a lot of people, our loneliness.
It's true.
You know, in a world that's really grappling with how technology shapes our relationships.
Okay, so then where does that leave us?
Right.
Like, how do we navigate this whole digital dating landscape?
I think the key takeaway here is awareness.
Okay.
You know? Go in with your eyes open.
Okay.
Understand the pitfalls.
All right, so we're talking like
the superficiality.
That's a big one.
The ghosting.
The worst.
The pressure to present this like picture perfect version of yourself.
Nobody's perfect.
Right. But I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that behind every profile, behind every pixel is a real person with their own hopes, their own dreams.
Right. Like they're just...
And their own awkward selfies.
They're just trying to figure it out like the rest of us.
Exactly. And I think if we can just remember that human element, you know? Even when you're staring at a screen, that we're dealing with actual people.
Right. It's not
just profiles to swipe left or right on.
Exactly.
Maybe we can approach all of this with a little more empathy, a little more honesty, and maybe even have a little more fun along the way.
Right. Like, what's the point if you're not having fun?
Exactly. Because technology should be about connecting us. Not isolating us further.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we're taking something that should be connecting us and then somehow making it more isolating.
Right, and making it more complicated.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the question is like, where do we go from here?
Right. Where do we go? Well, maybe instead of trying to force it to be something it's not, maybe it's about redefining what a meaningful connection can look like in a digital age.
I like that.
You know? Because the reality is, these apps are a tool.
They
are
are
a way to meet people you might not otherwise meet.
Right. And there's something kind of exciting about that.
Absolutely. And to think about all the potential relationships that might not exist if it weren't for this technology.
That's true. That's true.
So maybe it's about shifting our perspective a little bit.
Okay. So how do we do that? How do we shift our perspective?
I think a good place to start is with ourselves, you know, like checking our own expectations at the door.
Okay. I like that.
Remembering that vulnerability is not a weakness.
Yeah. It takes courage to put yourself out there.
Exactly. And you know what else? It's okay to take a break.
From the apps.
Yeah. From the apps.
Yeah.
If they're starting to feel like a chore, like you're just swiping and swiping and not really getting anywhere.
It's exhausting.
It is. Step away. Go for a walk.
Great.
Read a book, talk to a friend.
Yeah, reconnect with yourself.
Exactly.
Okay.
And maybe when you come back, you'll have a fresh perspective.
Okay.
And who knows, maybe a little more patience for the process.
Because I think patience is a big part of it.
I think so too.
It's so easy to get caught up
Yeah.
in wanting that instant gratification.
It is the nature of the apps, right?
It is.
Yeah.
But real connection, that takes time.
It does.
It takes effort.
It does.
And it takes, a willingness to be open to something.
Yeah.
Maybe even a little bit unexpected.
I'm a little bit messy.
Exactly. And messy is real life,
Exactly.
So maybe at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's not about judging the apps or judging the people on them.
Right.
It's about kind of like accepting this new frontier of dating with all of its quirks and all of its possibilities.
Right. So much possibility. And
Yeah.
remembering that ultimately,
Yeah.
whether we find love online or offline, it's all part of the same messy, beautiful journey.
Well said.
So to all of you out there navigating the world of dating apps,
Yes.
be kind to yourselves.
Absolutely.
Be open to the unexpected
You never know. And who knows, maybe you'll swipe right into a love story.
that you'll cherish forever.
All right, everyone. That's it for our deep dive this week.
Until next time.